The 2012 Mayan Calendar. In 2007, a single misreading of an ancient stone tablet convinced millions of people that the world would end on December 21st, 2012. The tablet belonged to the Maya, a civilization that had been tracking time for over 3,000 years. What it actually showed was the end of one calendar cycle and the beginning of the next. Nothing more, nothing sinister, just a page turn. But that detail got buried fast. Within 2 years, the theory had spread across every corner of the internet. Books were written, documentaries were produced. A Hollywood disaster film grossed $770 million at the box office. NASA began receiving so many panic emails from terrified citizens that they published an official statement just to calm people down. The statement had to address dozens of specific theories, including a rogue planet, a solar flare, and a magnetic pole reversal. In China, a man named Liu Qiwan spent over $280,000 of his life savings building a fleet of giant orange survival pods. Each pod was a reinforced fiberglass sphere designed to float through floods and withstand fire. He built 7 of them. His neighbors thought he had lost his mind. Across America, bunker sales tripled. Survival food companies ran out of stock. Some families quietly moved to higher ground. Others withdrew their savings from banks and kept the cash at home. Mayan scholars had been saying the same thing for years. The calendar was not a prophecy. It was an odometer, hitting 0 and rolling back over. The Maya themselves had written about dates far beyond 2012, which made the idea of a scheduled apocalypse logically impossible. December 21st, 2012 arrived on a Friday. Nothing happened, but people went crazy. Y2K. In 1999, the entire world held its breath waiting for its own computers to kill it. The problem was simple. For decades, programmers had written dates using only 2 digits for the year. 1999 was stored as 99. When the year 2000 arrived and rolled over to 00, experts warned that machines would read it as 1900. No one knew exactly what would happen next. The predictions were catastrophic. Planes would lose navigation mid-flight and fall from the sky. Nuclear missile systems would malfunction and launch without warning. Hospital equipment would shut down. Power grids would fail. Banks would lose every record of every account ever held. Governments around the world spent an estimated $300 billion fixing the problem before it could arrive. The U.S. military went on high alert. The United Nations set up a dedicated task force. Russia and America briefly agreed to share early warning data in case either country's missile systems misfired. Ordinary people cleared out supermarkets. Hardware stores sold out of generators. Thousands of Americans moved cash out of banks and hid it at home. Survivalist communities swelled overnight. In the final weeks of 1999, gun sales spiked in several U.S. states. Some people genuinely did not expect to see January. Midnight arrived on January 1st, 2000. The lights stayed on. Planes kept flying. Missiles stayed grounded. Banks opened normally the next morning. Some experts argued the $300 billion fix had worked perfectly, and the disaster had been real, but prevented. Others argued the threat had been vastly overstated from the beginning. That argument has never been fully settled. Harold Camping. In 2011, an 89-year-old radio preacher from California announced he had calculated the exact date of the apocalypse. His name was Harold Camping. His method was a mathematical formula he had built from specific Bible verses, cross-referenced with historical dates he believed were hidden inside Scripture. The date he landed on was May 21, 2011. Camping had a large and devoted following. His radio network, Family Radio, broadcast across 150 stations in the United States. When he announced the date, thousands of his listeners believed him completely. What happened next was not subtle. Followers began liquidating their savings. Some quit their jobs. Some sold their homes. A retired transit worker named Robert Fitzpatrick spent $140,000 of his own retirement money plastering New York City subway stations with warning posters. Caravans of believers drove across the country in branded vehicles telling strangers the end was 6 weeks away. May 21st came and went without incident. Camping went back to his formula and announced he had made a calculation error. The real date, he said, was October 21st, 2011. His remaining followers held on. October 21st passed quietly. Camping issued a brief statement saying he was bewildered. He retired from public life and passed away in 2013. Heaven's Gate. In March of 1997, a comet called Hale-Bopp became visible in the night sky above California. It was one of the brightest comets seen from Earth in decades. For most people, it was a spectacle. For 39 people living in a large house in Rancho Santa Fe, it was a signal. The group was called Heaven's Gate. They had been together for over 20 years, led by a man named Marshall Applewhite. He taught his followers that their bodies were temporary containers, their real selves were extraterrestrial, and a spacecraft traveling behind the comet was coming to take them home before the Earth was wiped clean and recycled. To board the ship, they believed, they had to leave their physical bodies behind. Over 3 days in late March, all 39 members consumed a lethal mixture of phenobarbital and vodka. They were found lying in their bunks, dressed in identical black clothing and new black and white Nike trainers. Each had a $5 bill and rolls of quarters in their pocket. Applewhite was among them. It was said that they packed these for the journey. The quarters were for payphones, the $5 bill for vagrancy laws, in case they needed to call home from wherever they landed. Then the comet passed. No spacecraft appeared behind it. Astronomers confirmed there had never been any object following the comet's trail. The 39 members of Heaven's Gate, in fact, did not come back. Planet X. Sometime in the late 1990s, a theory began circulating in online forums that a rogue planet was on a direct collision course with Earth. The planet had several names. The most common was Nibiru. The most dramatic was Planet X. The theory claimed the planet was being tracked by governments worldwide, but kept secret to prevent mass panic. The first predicted impact date was 2003. When 2003 passed, the date moved to 2012. When 2012 passed, new dates appeared. 2017, 2023. Each time a date passed, a revised calculation surfaced within weeks. NASA has officially addressed and debunked the Nibiru theory multiple times. Astronomers point out that a planet large enough to threaten Earth would have been visible to the naked eye for years before any impact. Amateur telescope owners across the world would have spotted it independently long before any government could suppress the information. The theory has never produced a single verifiable piece of evidence. No photograph, no telescope reading, no coordinates that checked out. The next predicted date is already circulating. A small and dedicated group of believers are watching the sky right now, waiting for something that professional astronomers say was never there: Yellowstone. Beneath Yellowstone National Park, approximately 5 miles below the surface, sits a magma chamber roughly 55 miles long and 25 miles wide. It is one of the largest active supervolcanic systems on the planet. It has erupted 3 times in recorded geological history. The last eruption was 640,000 years ago. When it happened, it buried most of North America under a layer of ash several feet deep. Entire ecosystems vanished within days. Scientists confirm all of this. None of it is a conspiracy. What they cannot confirm is when it will happen again. The ground above the chamber rises and falls every year as pressure shifts below. Thousands of small earthquakes rattle the park annually. In 2014, a stretch of road in the park buckled and melted from geothermal heat rising from below. A full eruption would release energy thousands of times greater than any nuclear weapon ever detonated. The ash cloud would block sunlight across the continent for years. Crop failures would follow within months. The effects would reach every country on Earth within a decade. Geologists say the warning signs before an eruption would likely give some advance notice. Likely. The word they use is likely. The chamber is still active. The ground is still moving. The 640,000-year clock has no alarm. And unlike every other theory on this list, no scientist on Earth will tell you it isn't coming. They will only tell you they don't know when.